Okay, so there's a pretty honest conversation, I think, that's going on at the moment around Liverpool's striking options. After what's happened against Everton, what's happened against Plymouth, where the goals have come from this season, the concerns around the turnover of the squad. I did a clip a couple of weeks ago on Sky Sports, which was talking about, I think, some of the, at least more, not shocking, but like uncomfortable transfer, shall we say, that may come in the very near future for Liverpool. Arne Slot's a fantastic coach. And, you know, the squad that Klopp built, I think there are so many pluses to that. But I also think that getting to this point in the season, and when you don't necessarily have when you had a fully fit squad and you had a bunch of players that fit the system really well, but now you've played some of those players more than others. Some of them are maybe lagging a little bit more than others. Some of them you found their limitations maybe a little bit more than others. Teams know not to fear some because they know that your system is relatively muted, or the other way around where they know that they need to emphasize. So for instance, if you put a front line of Gakpo, Nunez, Salah, they know that the two players that they can specifically focus on will be Salah and Gakpo. Now, obviously that leaves Nunez a little bit open, but even last night or whenever you watched the Everton game the other day, you could see that Everton were not nearly as worried about Nunez. They knew if you just face him up and then let it run at you, you've got a pretty good chance of getting the ball. And if we sit deep enough, we are going to frustrate you. Now, every now and again, you surprise an opposition team. You get a Brentford or you get whatever it is, right? Where you can just bang and, you know, it works out for you. But that doesn't happen every time. And that is not going to get you to a championship season after season after season after season. It may in the short term while you surprise other teams. But I think at this point in the season where oppositions are beginning to work out Liverpool's strengths and weaknesses, where they're beginning to work out that if you get into Liverpool, if you break down the passing lanes into the centre of midfield, if you break down some of the shapes that they're trying to make, then you can very easily frustrate these teams. Then, yeah, you're going to find that Liverpool stutter a little bit and sometimes flatter to deceive. And Everton sort of found, Moyes and Everton kind of found that. So did, I mean, Plymouth to a lesser extent, but you get my point around Plymouth. Like, Plymouth got a penalty, and outside of that, I think they created one, maybe two meaningful chances. And I think Liverpool really did stumble on the day. What we're finding is, there are now some key positions that Slot and just Liverpool in general really need to upgrade. And the combination of the two, you know, even though we're talking about we need to support these players going into the next part of the season because, you know, I need the confidence of these players, is making for an uncomfortable conversation. First of all, we need to be able to support these guys. We need to be able to put them in a position where they feel that they are our men. They are, when they step out on the field, they represent Liverpool and they can represent Liverpool for years. This isn't just a relationship of convenience, one which possibly may trip us up later in the season if the players don't feel particularly committed or are saving themselves for a transfer or are worried about their futures around the club, all these kind of things. This is a very realistic marriage, which in the long run will work for them. Now, there have been some people who've been long-term servants of the club and they would definitely feel that, hey, this is my last dance of sorts. You could argue that that would be Mo Salah. You could argue to an extent that would be Trent. I think Virg re-signs a contract if he hasn't already. You could argue that might be Jota. I think maybe if you're looking at anyone else, you're probably not saying, possibly Alisson. I mean, Alisson is definitely a conversation we need to have. One of the best goalkeepers in the world, if not at the moment, the best goalkeeper in the world. But Liverpool have seemingly chosen to move on from him because statistically, they feel that there is another era for goalkeepers coming in. They feel that there is something else that Liverpool want to achieve through the goalkeeper. And Alisson, whether that is through inertia or whatever else, is probably no longer the option come the end of the season. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have. He's probably the goalkeeper that I've loved the most in my Liverpool life. And believe me, in that time, we've had some rather unlovable, but also quite, I want to say like adored by the fan type goalkeepers. Even Pepe Reina, who's really tried to ruin his legacy after leaving the club. That point to one side, right? That's Kelleher and Alisson going next summer, realistically. This was all triggered, by the way, by an article by Sam Maguire on, I want to say Inside Anfield or the Anfield Inside. I really should look that up before I do videos. But ultimately, like, let me just scroll up. I want to make sure that I quote this correctly, right? Yeah, it was Anfield Watch. There you go. Anyway. That's Kelleher and Alisson gone next summer. That's Mamardashvili and Jarosz being promoted to 1 and 2. Jarosz probably deserves that promotion. Whether he should sit in that promotion is a whole other question. He's already won an Austrian league, is probably a goalkeeper that could be starting in the first team, not for Liverpool necessarily, but for a team. And he's a decent goalkeeper. Like we saw when he has had his brief moments on the field, I think he's looked pretty good. Then we go into Liverpool's back line, right? And again, this is probably a more detailed conversation, but I want to talk about it, at least in the short term, and get your thoughts before I do a wider, more detailed video on each position. If Trent goes, we definitely need a new right back. We need someone who can rotate with Conor Bradley. My theory with Trent is actually that Trent ends up staying, not necessarily because Real Madrid end their pursuit, but more because I think Trent stays knowing that he wants to be a Liverpool legend and knowing that he wants to be the Liverpool guy, and also knowing that medically it's probably better for him to stay at the club. Real Madrid run their players into the ground, and I'm not 100% sure that Trent's body is ready to be run into the ground just yet. Konate stays. I know that PSG are going to go hard for him this summer, so to speak. They're going to offer him the captaincy. They're going to offer him a legacy at the club. He's going back to a country and a city he feels comfortable in. But I think Liverpool is a convincing proposition, and I would say stays. Virgil van Dijk, I think, stays. I think the next 3 years of this career that he's got are him transitioning a new centre-back in, transitioning new partners in, finding his role as a elder statesman of the club. And then I think Liverpool definitely go for a new left-back at the club. I think it's going to be a Kirkez type, an Aït-Nouri type, an aggressive, attacking left-back who can do the underlapping runs that Arne Slot needs him to do and the overlapping crossing, which he also needs him to do, whilst also adding something defensively. But I think that's also where we see Liverpool's midfield change a little bit. And I think it's a slightly uncomfortable conversation that we need to have about Liverpool's midfield. Gravenberch is a fantastic player. And I think most of us were so pleasantly surprised by the double pivot that he's developed with McAllister. I don't think it's Gravenberch that we necessarily see leave this summer. I think a lot of people are actually looking at McAllister, a player who's world class. Liverpool, I don't think even necessarily want to get rid of him, but there are a couple of small things you probably pick on if you were even to pick on the deficiencies of a World Cup winner and potential Premier League winner. A, in his fitness and how long he can go in the games, probably in the most exhausting and demanding position in an Arne Slot side. B, in some of his attributes, which I think Slot himself would probably say, oh, this guy's great. I think, he deserves a position in the team, blah, blah, blah. And he has deserved that position in his team. His goal against Everton was fantastic. Some of his other goals have been game-changing, life-changing for some people. And he's a good player. He's a fantastic player, in fact. He's someone I'd want in our squad. Even if we did move him, even if he got moved on, or even if he moved on himself, I would be upset that he left. I would say that is unfulfilled potential of potential Liverpool legend for me, or a potential Liverpool stalwart, someone who would always be welcome back in the city. If he won a Premier League title, if he won a Champions League, of course he'd always be welcome back. But yeah, my point, someone who could have had a good couple of titles under his belt there and could have spent a sustained amount of time in the city. It's mainly because I constantly hear his father and other people in the media talking about a move somewhere else. Frankly. It's not that I therefore think, oh, well, he's had his head turned every day. I think he's very much dialed in with Liverpool. I think he's the kind of player who was at Brighton before, probably had his head turned a couple of times, probably had a couple of people make offers for him. And you know what? Fair enough. Like, if you can play on, which you probably can as a football player, you want to make the most of your career, all these things, fair enough. And I think Liverpool might look for someone who can then, in a Zubimendi shape, break up the play, be that distributor. We lacked that against Everton. And without Trent in the side, or without Trent more consistently in the side, especially because of his injury record more recently, we need to shift that emphasis more into midfield. Could that be Dominic Szoboszlai if we were to, say, move Mo Salah into the 10? Again, I've had this conversation with Sam Maguire, who wrote the article. We were talking about maybe moving Szoboszlai a little bit deeper, bringing the energy a little bit deeper, giving him a bit more space to drive into, giving him the latitude that he needs, the space that he's shown he can get, possibly rotating in someone like Curtis Jones, possibly someone like Harvey Elliott. I think Harvey stays in the squad overall at Liverpool, if I'm completely honest. And then bringing in someone, as a few other people have quoted, like Timber from Feyenoord with the energy that he has at the moment. Wouldn't be upset by that. And again, from a club and a system which I think he'd be relatively familiar with and is showing the potential around. And then I think that is that's Liverpool's preferred three in midfield. Or yeah, probably preferred three. That goes Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, possibly someone else comes in there to free up Szoboszlai every now and again. You need a quad, you need at least a five that you can rotate into that midfield. And I think that's going to happen. And then up front, you're possibly looking at selling. Go with me here. Núñez. I think it's been on the books for a while. I think it's been on the cards. I think it's been in the mail. Whatever you want to say about Núñez, that you love him or you think he's got potential. This guy is 26. He will be at peak market value. There's still time in his contract. And if Liverpool need to raise, I would say between 200 and 250 million to make a drastic summer rebuild and bring in the instruments and the players that Slot needs in order to play the football he needs to play, then Nunes is one of those first heads, which we wish you all the best. You've been fantastic. There has been some really good moments, but ultimately we have to move on. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. But then there's an uncomfortable one. I think maybe you feel a bit more comfortable, actually. Maybe you're less emotionally... I love the Luis Diaz chant. That's why I don't want to get rid of it. But Luis Diaz is possibly a conversation we need to have. Again, someone who's been agitating for a move to Spain in general. Maybe there's a cultural crossover. Maybe there's a financial crossover. Maybe there's just a hope for your career. You're getting into the peak of your powers. You've possibly had the title charges that you thought you would get at Liverpool. You've shown those great qualities. You've seen that there have been other people that have moved there and fulfilled their potential because it suits the kind of football that they want to play more than the Premier League suits the kind of football they want to play. And you've been a bit part player, a circle in a square hole for a little while now. Fair enough. Again, if we can get a decent price for him, I don't know if that's a big problem to a lot of Liverpool fans. I know that they'd miss him, and I know that this will feel like a very drastic summer, but if you look at the names that I'm talking about bringing in, then you would understand. That would leave Cody Gakpo very much the left wing for Liverpool. Fair enough. Then there's the sale of someone like Jota. I think in this summer, if the right price comes in for him, if it's an Arsenal and they come in and they go, we got 40 to 50, what are you taking? I think Liverpool go, we're interested. We can turn this around. We need you to drop out of the Isak sale. And we need you to bring in Jota. And Jota will go, you know what's been good? But Slot, this season, I think he's found that Jota's been fantastic. He was his preferred guy through the middle for a little while, but he's just not been fit. And if you cannot evolve in a team structurally because you are not fit, if you cannot evolve tactically because you are not fit, if you cannot come back and play the intense way that Arne Slot needs to play in order to press, in order to counterattack, in order to be on point and sharp, like we've seen Liverpool be just a couple of times, there have been hints of those things. And when they have been those hints, they've been the best Arne Slot side. It's time to move on. It sounds harsh. It's much easier to let go at the end of the season than it is now. Possibly. It's an awkward conversation. I'm just saying it's an awkward conversation. Then we're looking at who will come in. And the big names on that would, of course, be Timber. First of all, I think Timber's a good player. I don't know if he's a big name. I don't know if he counts as like a, whoa, we can let a few guys go for this guy. Do you know what I mean? But the other big name that Liverpool will probably go to 100 to 120 to 130 million for this summer and compete with Arsenal, Chelsea, the other big teams in Europe for, is Alexander Isak. Almost every club in Europe has identified him as their big transfer for this summer. Real Madrid don't need him. Barcelona cannot afford him, and other teams will not be able to compete. But that, as a side, is really interesting to me and moves it into a very different way of moving the ball, all those kind of things. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Would Isak be the player for you? Who would you let go? Who would you keep? Does some of the games more recently prove things? And how would you feel about letting Doak and Morton go in order to fund the 200 to 250 million transfer kitty for the summer? That's all the conversation. Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you guys again in a little while. Much love.